My name is Isabella Hartfield. I'm 27 years old and I'm about to tell you a story that shattered everything. I thought I knew about family loyalty and love. This isn't just some drama you'd see on TV, it's my real life, my pain, my battle. In my revenge, I was born and raised in a quiet, picturesque town in Virginia, where everyone seemed to know each other's name and wave at you when you drove by. I thought my life was safe, predictable even. But that illusion crumbled the day I discovered the cruel secret my own family had been hiding from me for years, one that would set me on a dark path of vengeance. I never imagined myself walking. By the end of this story, you'll understand exactly why I did what I did and why I don't regret a single second of it. Before we dive into my nightmare, I want you to stick with me until the end, because the truth gets uglier with every detail and you won't see the twists coming. And hey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this channel so more people can hear stories like mine. This story is written and edited by Dark Lifeside Diaries. It all started on a warm spring evening. I had just gotten off work at the little bookstore cafe I managed downtown, the kind of place that smelled of old paper and freshly brewed coffee. I was closing up, wiping down the last table, when my phone buzzed with a message from my cousin Elena. She rarely texted me, so seeing her name light up my screen felt strange. The message read, "We need to talk tonight. It's about your family." My stomach dropped. Elena was always the quiet one, the kind of person who avoided gossip and drama. For her to reach out like that meant something serious was brewing. I called her immediately, but she didn't answer. Instead, she sent me an address one I didn't recognize and told me to meet her there at 8 p.m. Against my better judgment, I went. The address led me to a nearly abandoned gas station off an old country road, the kind of place where the fluorescent lights flickered and the silence was almost too loud. She was leaning against her beat-up red Jeep, arms crossed, looking as if she'd aged 10 years overnight. "Elena, what's going on?" I asked. She didn't waste time. "Isabella, your father isn't who you think he is. And your mother, she's been lying to you your whole life." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. I tried to laugh it off, thinking maybe she'd lost her mind, but she shoved a manila envelope into my hands. Inside were photographs, grainy old, but clear enough for me to see my father, Richard Hartfield, arm in arm with a woman I never met. In some photos, he was holding a baby. The dates stamped on the back showed they were taken just 2 years before I was born. "That's your half-sister," Elena said, pointing to the baby in one of the pictures. "Her name's Lydia. She's been living less than an hour away from you this whole time, and the worst part, she knows about you. She's been in touch with your parents for years." I stood there numb, staring at the evidence in my hands. My father, the man I adored, the man who taught me how to ride my bike, the man who sat through every school play, had another daughter he never told me about. My mother knew, and they both decided to keep it from me. "Elena, why are you telling me this now?" I managed to choke out. She hesitated, looking around as if making sure we weren't being watched. "Because Lydia isn't just your half-sister. She's the reason your father's business went bankrupt last year. She's been bleeding him dry, and your parents are letting it happen. They think they're protecting you, but they're really protecting her." The rage that started to bubble inside me was unlike anything I'd ever felt. Betrayal is a cold, sharp thing. It cuts you in ways you don't expect. My mind was spinning with questions, but one thing became clear. I had to find Lydia, and I had to find out just how deep this betrayal went. When I got home that night, my parents were sitting in the living room laughing at some mindless sitcom like nothing in the world was wrong. I stood in the doorway watching them, wondering how they could keep such a massive secret from me and still smile. My father noticed me and asked if I was okay. I lied, saying I was just tired. I went to my room, locked the door, and spread the photos out on my bed. I didn't sleep a single minute that night. I kept staring at the images of Lydia, her soft blonde hair, her green eyes that looked eerily like mine. She was real. She was out there. And if Elena was right, she wasn't just some innocent sister I never knew about. She was my enemy. The next day, I began my search. I didn't tell anyone. I started by running her name through social media. It didn't take long to find her. Lydia Hartfield, 24 years old, living in a gorgeous house on the outskirts of Richmond. Her profile was full of expensive vacations, designer clothes, and smiling pictures with my father. Every post was like another stab in my chest. She wasn't just in touch with him, she was flaunting it. That was the moment I decided I wasn't just going to confront her, I was going to destroy her. But to do that, I had to be smart, and if I've learned anything, it's that revenge is a dish best served slowly and with precision. What I didn't know yet was that Lydia already had plans for me, and they were far worse than anything I could have. Imagine the morning after my mother's death felt like a nightmare wrapped in an ugly reality. I couldn't wake up from, and while the small town around us moved forward with its usual gossip-ridden pace, I was stuck in a strange mix of rage and disbelief, staring at the front door and waiting for Detective Harris to arrive with the autopsy report, because part of me needed the confirmation that Mom didn't just pass in her sleep, as the hospital claimed. And sure enough, when the detective slid the file across my kitchen table and leaned in with a grim face, I caught the words poison ingestion, probable homicide, and the floor seemed to tilt under my feet, my hands trembling as I traced those black letters, wondering who could have hated her enough to end her life. Though deep down I knew our enemies list wasn't short. My Uncle Martin, who resented Mom for keeping the family business away from him, his daughter Elise, who had always envied me and whispered poison into people's ears about us, and even our neighbor Mrs. Cartwright, who blamed Mom for her son's failed marriage. But what I couldn't ignore was the memory of a heated argument between Mom and Uncle Martin just 2 nights before her death. Muffled shouting match I had overheard from the staircase, where Martin's deep voice had said something about making sure you regret crossing me. And now every word seemed like a prophecy, but the detective's voice pulled me back as he said they couldn't officially accuse anyone without more evidence, that it might take weeks to run toxicology tests, and all I could think was weeks, while the killer was walking free, smiling in church pews and shaking hands at the grocery store. So I decided I couldn't just sit still. I had to do my own digging, and that started with retracing every step Mom took in her final days, from her volunteer work at the community center, where she helped set up the fall festival, to her meetings with the town council about restoring the old library, to her last grocery run, where I remembered seeing a nervous cashier named Jonah, who, when I cornered him after work, confessed that Uncle Martin had come into the store the day before Mom died and purchased a small bottle of rat poison, claiming it was for a pest problem at his barn. But the look in Jonah's eyes told me he didn't believe that for a second, and neither did I, though the thought of confronting Martin directly made my blood turn cold. So instead I started shadowing him, parking 2 streets away from his house at night, watching through my car window as he met with shady men in dark jackets I didn't recognize, and once I saw him hand over an envelope that looked far too thick to be a letter, which made me wonder if Mom's death was tied to something bigger than just family greed, maybe something criminal. But before I could connect the dots, Elise cornered me outside the bakery, her perfectly curled hair bouncing as she smiled a smile too sweet to be genuine, and said, "You're not going to like where this is heading, cousin, for your own sake. Let it go." And then she stepped closer, lowering her voice to a hiss, "Or you might end up just like her," before walking away as if she hadn't just threatened my life in broad daylight. And for a moment, my hand shook so violently I had to lean against the brick wall. But instead of fear, something else rose in me, a promise silent but sharp that I would not stop until every single person responsible for Mom's death was exposed and ruined, no matter the cost. And so that night I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook, mapping out names, dates, places, and the thin threads that connected them all, realizing with every line I drew that I was stepping into a dangerous game, where the rules didn't matter and the players wouldn't hesitate to spill more blood. But it didn't matter, because Mom deserved justice, and I was going to deliver it with my own hands if I had to, even if it meant burning bridges, betraying relatives, and dragging every secret they'd buried into the light until there was nowhere left for them to hide. The weeks after my daring escape from the burning cabin became a blur of sleepless nights, police questioning, and a gnawing fear that Mason's twisted influence hadn't been completely destroyed, because no matter how many times I replayed that night in my head, I could still hear his mocking laugh echoing over the flames. And sometimes I swore I saw a shadow lingering near my window, but the detectives insisted that his remains were found in the ruins, even though they couldn't explain why his ring, the one I'd seen on his finger since the day we met, was missing from the body. And that was enough to keep me looking over my shoulder every time I stepped outside, especially when strange things started happening around the small safe house the police had moved me to. The front door would be unlocked when I was sure I'd bolted it. My phone would ring once in the middle of the night and go silent when I answered, and once, when I was taking out the trash, I found a single Polaroid tucked into the bin showing me sleeping in my own bed, which sent me spiraling into paranoia, so deep I almost packed my bags to flee the country. But Detective Harris, my only real ally, begged me to stay, claiming they were close to uncovering the network Mason had been part of a web of wealthy predators who used their money to crush anyone who defied them. And when Harris showed me a blurry surveillance photo of a man in a baseball cap leaving the alley behind the safe house, my heart froze, because I recognized the tattoo curling up his neck. It was Mason's, and the only explanation was that he hadn't died in that fire, but had let me believe he had turning the game into something more sinister, something he could control. From the shadows, and that night as rain pounded against the roof, I made the decision that if Mason was still alive hiding and waiting, then I wouldn't cower in fear anymore. I would hunt him down myself before he could finish whatever sick plan. He had started. The plan to end Mason's reign of terror began quietly with me pretending to retreat into the fearful shell he expected, but beneath that facade, I was gathering every shred of information Detective Harris could discreetly pass. Along names of his contacts, addresses of safe houses, financial trails that led to offshore accounts, and when one of Harris's informants tipped us off that Mason would be attending a private poker game in a secluded vineyard estate outside of town, I knew this was my only chance because Mason thrived in shadows surrounded by people who either owed him or feared him, but he wouldn't be expecting me to walk straight into his lair, and on the night of the game I dressed in a way that would make me unrecognizable, my hair dyed dark, and my posture confident, walking into that candlelit room with a tray of champagne like I belonged there, and the moment our eyes met across the table, the corner of his mouth lifted in that same sick smirk, confirming he had been alive this whole time, watching me, savoring my fear. But now it was my turn to savor the look in his eyes as I slipped the USB drive into Harris's hand, hidden in the sleeve of my dress, before the SWAT team outside crashed through the doors, chaos exploding as shouts and gunfire filled the air. And in that chaos, Mason bolted for the cellar, dragging me with him in one last desperate bid to assert control, his grip bruising my arm as he hissed that I'd never escape him. But the moment he reached for the cellar door, I twisted free, driving the concealed blade Harris had given me into his side, and as he stumbled backward, the weight of his arrogance finally pulling him to the ground, I whispered that this time there would be no coming back, leaving him to bleed out on the stone floor while I walked out into the night, the flashing red and blue lights reflecting off the vineyard walls, knowing that the girl who had once been prey was gone forever, replaced by someone who could never be broken again. And when Harris caught my eye and gave a slight nod, I realized I had not just survived Mason, I had destroyed the monster he had become, and in doing so reclaimed every piece of myself he had tried to steal.